the first Hackney Council Cabinet meeting of 2022. Happy New Year to residents and officers. We're now live this evening. I will ask Jessica to just read the protocol for participation in remote meetings. As per usual, this is a hybrid meeting with a mixture of Cabinet colleagues and senior officers in the Council chamber and colleagues joining us online.
Thank you. Please only speak to when invited to by the Chair. Any participating members are to keep their camera on during the proceedings unless they're having connection issues. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communications via the Chair. Please ensure officers remotely attending that your mics are muted when you're not speaking. If you're referring to a specific page or picture in the report, refer to the page number. If you're having technical difficulties, please use the chat function in the Google Meet to alert the meeting. Please do not use the chat function to put formal questions to the committee or to make other comments. Any persistent disruptive behaviour will result in removal from the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. I can see the chat bar and the raise hand function for people joining remotely, and I see that Councillors Marima, Woodley, Ette and Maxwell are joining us, and Councillor Chapman joining us. I know he's here and remotely. You're doing two things at once, Councillor Chapman, joining us remotely, then obviously other Cabinet colleagues and Deputy Mayors, Bramble and Nicholson are in the room. It's great to be back in the chair, but thank you to Deputy Mayor Bramble for various reasons filling in over the last two Cabinet meetings. I think we know how tough it's been again for our residents over the Christmas and New Year period and our local businesses. We are obviously seeing a step down of both the Mayor of London's declaration of a serious incident and some of the COVID regulations. It's still no time to completely step back from understanding how serious the disease is and the risk associated with it. I don't, though, want to always be sort of Cassandra-like from this seat of thinking there will be doom and gloom. We start a new year with hope. We've obviously seen all of the work around the booster programme and the work of our care and health system in Hackney, and we continue to do what we can to keep ourselves safe, but also look forward over the course of this year to hopefully turning a page fully on the pandemic and returning to a degree of sort of full normality. I did want to highlight, though, that obviously there are still people in the Homerton, still people losing their lives, and obviously our thoughts are with all of those supporting our efforts to keep people as healthy as they can be and those that have lost loved ones over this difficult period. There are two items relating to the Council's budget at the meeting this evening. I just wanted to highlight as well some of our campaign work as a council back to government and representations following the local government funding settlement. We are on the eve, next time we meet here in the Cabinet, we will obviously be considering the Council's full budget for the year ahead. You'll see from the OFP and other budget-related documents this evening, we're laying the building blocks for that budget. We've seen the impact of the pandemic, the cyber attack, and over a decade of austerity, and I think we all agree that meeting our unbalanced budget is as hard as it has ever been over the last decade. And we are seeing, and it's very vividly shown in the local funding settlement. If you look at the section on our base funding, that's only increased by, I think, just under £1 million. All of the other flexibilities are either assuming council tax rises or one-off funding, and no more so than in the space around adult social care, but also children's social care, homelessness, no recourse to public funds. All of these pressures still remain and involve a considerable cost shunting from national government to local government. Alongside this, and it was vividly brought home, and it will be vividly brought home in the amendment we're making to the HRA business plan, councils and residents are facing considerable inflation. We know that residents are worried about the cost of living crisis, challenges over wage stagnation, energy and food bills rising, and unavoidably rises in the tax burden for working families. We know from the work around poverty reduction that people are turning to the council for help and advice. That's why we set up the emergency grants programmes and focused government grant funding on those most vulnerable. And I thank all of those Hackney residents that donated to our campaign around food poverty over the Christmas and New Year period, raising money to be spent on this local need through our local third sector partners. The appeal is still open, I understand, and so in whether or not you've donated there or donating your own time, or you are donating to charities in the borough that you're familiar with, please keep donating. That need is rising across all of those supporting people with the cost of living crisis. I'm not going to comment on the shenanigans in number 10 and Sue Gray's report, but obviously there does seem to be that sense of one rule for one group of people and rules for the rest of us, and obviously it can't go unnoticed that there's more focus in Westminster on those sorts of issues than some of these cost of living crises. Last week, though, we did write to the Levelling Up Secretary to highlight the challenges of short-term sticking plasters in relation to our budget. That's a part of the formal response to the local government funding settlement, and I know that Ian and his team are working with London councils on a London-wide response to the consultation. We'll see a final settlement in the next few weeks. But anyone that's read the letter and read the press release will see the challenges that we face to provide our universal services and everything else that we try to deliver. We will be considering, as I said, next month how we construct the final stages of the budget, but we will always keep our focus on delivering frontline services for the people of Hackney and protecting the most vulnerable, and you'll see more of that in the weeks and months to come. I'll finish with another item that we will be discussing later this evening, and I paid a visit to Dalston this afternoon with ward councillors. We have done a huge amount across the council, and I thank Cabinet colleagues, especially Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Jana Thomas, for their work to defend Dalston, to invest in Dalston and our vision for a fair and inclusive economy. And this evening, we are proposing to invest in a long-term lease of the shopping village, the Ridley Indoor Market, and going down there today, just really important to show our ongoing commitment to investing in Dalston, responding to the challenge of the community, both on the business, residents and visitors, and making sure that we safeguard Dalston for the future. And as I've said repeatedly, the people that are the most committed to saving Ridley Road is the council, both saving the street market and, in this case, the capacity that we're investing in around the indoor shopping village. And I just thank the officers who've been working on this, and we'll say more about that later on. I'll probably stop there and move on to the main item of the agenda, but thank everyone for the work that they're doing to make sure that we're an active council, investing in our businesses and investing in that COVID support and a fair recovery for our borough. Apologies for absence. Other than the colleagues joining us digitally, I don't have any apologies from the main meeting. No, and I think everyone is joining us digitally that isn't in the room, and some of us are there twice. Councillor Chapman, I have no urgent items of business, or are there any declarations of interest around the agenda items this evening? No. Okay, I've seen no notice of intention to conduct the business in private or representations there. I haven't got any deputations, questions or petitions via the monitoring officer. I looked to the monitoring officer to confirm that. None. I know we've got questions from the public at full council on Wednesday. We've got the unrestricted meetings of the cabinet meetings held on the 29th of November and 13th of December. Obviously, there was a very short gap between those two meetings, so we have both of them this evening. Deputy Mayor Bramble was in the chair, but does anyone have any comments on the minutes? Are we happy to agree them?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Item 7 is the housing revenue account, budget 2022-2023, which includes tenant rents and service charges. Councillor Mackenzie is to introduce the report, but I referenced it earlier on. There was an amendment to the report that has been circulated, and Councillor Mackenzie may go into more detail on that in a second as part of his introduction. But just to note that the 3.4 and 3.5 additional wording has been added to agree the level of service charges as set out in paragraph 12.4, except the landlord lighting charges and the service charges for the concierge service as set out in paragraph 12.5, and in 3.5 to delegate to the Group Director of Finance and Corporate Resources, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Housing and Cabinet Member for Finance, the setting of communal heating charges and landlord lighting service charge to reflect unit costs of utilities. That's clearly, our residents and the council are facing those energy cost pressures, and we will do all our can to obviously minimise the impact on residents. But I think it is right we make that amendment, given I think the challenges that have been reported earlier today. Councillor Mackenzie to introduce the main report.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville, and thank you, colleagues. The report in front of you sets out the budget proposals for the housing revenue account for 22-23. As you're aware, as a local authority, Hackney Housing continues to face the severe financial challenges brought on by COVID-19 and the criminal cyber attack. This has resulted in massive rent arrears, which of course we do not receive any government assistance for. The report summarises budget proposals, including proposed rent increases and efficiency savings required to set a balanced HRA budget. It also sets out proposals of service charges and other fees and charges, the vast majority of which are proposed to be frozen. Overall, there's a need to save another £2 million in the next year, having made £12 million saving over recent years. Unfortunately, we now find ourselves in the position where savings of £2 million cannot be made without impacting in some areas of service delivery. Wherever possible, the impact has been kept to a minimum, and in developing a savings programme, we have focused on protecting core servicing, embracing new ways of working and transforming services. One example of this is our proposed approach to transforming the delivery of our neighbourhood services. This will see housing officers move away from office-based reception services to our housing officers actually going out onto estates, delivering weekly surgeries within our communities. We're also proposing that most service charges for most tenants will be held at the 21-22 levels, reflecting improved efficiencies of saving, with the exception of concierge services, charges for landlord lighting and charges for communal heating. We need to increase the charges for landlord lighting and communal heating because of the unprecedented increase in utility prices. They have doubled in the last year. Regretfully, we need to pass these costs on to our residents in order to maintain our core services and to continue to invest in our housing stock. The contract for concierge services is linked to the London Living Wage, which is set to increase by 1.2% in 22-23, and the impact of the introduction of national insurance increases for social care, another 1.25% to the contractor. It is proposed to increase the rent in line with government guidelines of CPI plus 1%, which works out in real terms of an increase of 4.1%. We recognise that this is a time when we know that a lot of people are struggling financially. However, we also know that approximately 60% of our tenants are in receipt of housing benefit or universal credit, which will cover any increase. This means that average rents will go up by £4.23, giving an average rent of £107.33 per week. With this increase, Mayor Glanville, we still anticipate our rents will be the 7th lowest in London. The CPI plus 1% increase does not just represent our ability to cover our budget costs. It represents our ability to provide good services and to respond to the many challenges we face as we continue to invest in our delivery of service. You will have seen that we've recently agreed a £1 million increase to spend in supporting our delivery of our repair service. This represents our ability to refurbish and maintain an ageing and very diverse housing stock. It represents the continuation of our plan to grow and improve our DLO. With 1 million, we'll see an increase of our operational workforce by 25 members of staff. These budget proposals allow us to protect services to our most vulnerable residents, including the vital work of our financial inclusion team. It represents our response to the climate emergency by funding programs that will help reduce carbon emissions from our stock. And most importantly of all, it will ensure that we have the funding to keep our residents safe. In the context of an extremely challenging financial position we find ourselves, I believe that this represents a balanced, responsible and progressive budget, which will allow us to continue to invest and maintain and improve our existing housing stock and the lives of our residents. I would ask colleagues to support the recommendations as set out in the report and the tabled amendments in recommendations 3.4 and 3.5 relating to the increase of charges linked to energy costs. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. I know a huge amount of work and personal time has been put into getting the budget, and there's also been extensive engagement as well, with more to come. Does anyone else have any other comments or questions on the budget? No. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you again, Councillor Mackenzie. And we obviously need to just agree and note those amendments as well. We agreed. Thank you. So item 8 is the outcome of the early help review, and I think Deputy Mayor Bramble to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking the officers that supported this piece of work. Our Group Director, Jackie Burke, supported by Annie Gammon and Diane, who led that at senior level, but also contributions from Pauline, Donna and Joshua. Elected members, of course, Councillor Woodley, Councillor Gordon, Patrick's, Race, Fajana Thomas and Councillor Adajar. And that partnership on the member site working membership board has really helped pull this piece of work together. So the early help review, early help is what it says on the tin in a sense, Chair. It's basically the help that we give to children and families at the earliest iteration. And what the reviews seek to do is to make sure that we understand what we do and making sure that what we do is still fit for purpose. That was based on our principles, and any step change and shift change will be fundamentally on the principles of what we believe in terms of delivering early help. Taking a holistic approach to children and families, always aware of context. Context is everything and so powerful. Making sure services are integrated, and that simply might be, Chair, that a family doesn't have to tell their story time and time again. It could be something as simple as that. Remaining aspirational for our children and families and young people is pivotal and key, but that's predicated on a trusted relationship. And if you've had time to look through the review, that's something that came across really, really strongly, in that children and families trusted the officers that they worked with. Getting the right level of support at the right time is key and pivotal, and also a commitment really to reduce the disproportionality of Black and global majority children and young people that are in our statutory services. So it's looking at if what we do is still fit for purpose and making those systematic change, but also, you know, reviewing systematic and systemic practice, but also making sure everything was led by evidence, data, and talking to our children and young people has been key to this piece of work. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Does anyone want to? I know this has been very much a cross-directorate effort, and I know that you've also been working with other frontline councillors and Councillor Woodley on this piece of work. Does anyone else want to come in on the item, or any questions or comments? Not seeing any, so thank you again, echoing your thanks to senior officers and on your leadership on this. We're happy to agree the report.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Item 9 is the OFP. Just a slight typo. We've moved the property and disposals and acquisitions element over to the capital update, but they feature in the title of both reports. So just a note for next time that moves fully over to the capital update. There seems to be some repetition on the face of the cabinet papers, but apart from that, hand over to you, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you summed up at the beginning very well the overall situation that we face when we're looking at the finances this year. There are two parts to this report this time. There's first of all an analysis of our financial position for 21-2, and then a brief commentary or initial commentary on the settlement for 22-3 from the government that you referred to in your introduction. As regards to the current financial year, we are currently forecasting an overspend of almost 5 billion, 4.99 million, which is disappointing, but it is still well below that forecast back in August, and shows and reflects the action that the then council management team have taken to bear down on costs and keep that under control. And that is happening, and obviously it's vitally important that continues to happen. The forecast has increased for some specific reasons which are set out in paragraph 2.5 of the report. The other part of it relates to the spending review, which the Mayor referred to. While we're looking here still at the figures in overall national terms, and while the government have announced a 4%, what they say is a 4% spending increase, in reality that includes figures which have already been announced. We will hope would come from other sources, but are coming from core local government funding. There's a new care grant, but it will no way fix the crisis we've got in paying for social care in Hackney. Remember, of course, in addition to that, we'll have to find something like 2.3 million next year to pay for the national insurance increase. And lastly, although it is presented as an increase in funding, actually 40% of it is just the ability for us to charge our residents more and put up the council tax, and it's not called grant at all. So as the Mayor said, you know, it's a short-term measure, just sticking plaster. It in no way solves the financial situation or addresses properly the financial difficulties that local government faces. So in conclusion on that, really, I think as far as the council budget settings goes, we have no reason to change the assumptions that we made when, you know, we were discussing the overall framework for the budget this year. If you remember, we reported a budget gap for this year of 11 million at the beginning of the year, which we addressed at our last OFP report to this meeting. And we are still facing, we understand, a gap of some 10 million in 23-4 to face. So we still remain in a difficult financial situation after that settlement. And I'll just ask the committee to note the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman, and yeah, a very sober assessment. And I think what you've just outlined, and 2.5 and 2.7, and I suppose when I was referring to the sticking plaster, I think the ultimate sticking plaster is that services grant that came out of nowhere, is not guaranteed, and is where what elements of the core spending power increase that there are that isn't from council tax is found, and it is something that, you know, has been given and can be taken away, and we can't base our funding assumptions on it into the future. Any other questions or comments on the OFP? Deputy Mayor Bramble.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. I just reflect on what you and Councillor Chapman has said, that this is the 4th year that the settlement has been only for 1 year. And I reflect on that's 4 years this has happened. And if government had given local government a 4-year settlement, think of the planning that local authorities like ours could have done to meet that aspiration and deliver the services that we needed. And that's exactly why you, myself and Councillor Chapman wrote to government on this very matter. Thank you, Chair.
Powerfully put, Deputy Mayor Bramble, and I would add, you know, as we keep on saying, but is not acknowledged, you cannot level up the country, levelling down Hackney and London. And that very much underpins the passion at which we wrote that letter. Are we happy to note and agree the recommendations?
Noted.
Thank you all. The capital update in my name builds on some of the things I was talking about at the intro. I did just want to highlight the investment in the community building on Englefield Road. We've publicised and talked about this before, which is good. It's something that we're really committed to as a council. We're on the eve of the Lunar New Year, which many East Asian and Southeast Asian communities celebrate. It's commonly called Chinese New Year, but actually it's celebrated much more widely than that. And I look forward to marking that occasion with the Hackney Chinese Community Centre and other community organisations representing our diverse Southeast and East Asian communities. And this is a really good and welcome formal decision around investing in the future of the communities that we'll be celebrating and the infrastructure that supports their work. I think many of us have fond memories of the Untitled Centre and the activities that took place from there. I'm also looking forward to, and I referenced it in my introduction, meeting the archives team that is working to restore the Untitled archive, which was sadly seriously damaged by squatters to this building. We're making good our commitment to the Vietnamese community in the borough by helping restore that archive with some external grant funding and obviously bringing this building back into use. We were just interrupted by Councillor Billington coming into the meeting. It was almost on cue, even though I think she was looking for another meeting, but actually I was with her and Councillor Peters over the weekend, and our Chief Executive also walked the ward. This is a really important community building in Beauvoir, beyond the community's concerns. I think it will be great to see it's restored. The other point is, while we're obviously making a considerable investment on behalf of the council, we are unlocking that investment from the Good Growth Fund and the Mayor of London. And if we didn't take this opportunity to invest in this way, that hard-won investment from the community side and from the Mayor of London could be lost, and then we'd be left with a building without a clear plan for its future. So I'd like to thank the officers that have stood with this journey. Obviously, it's a considerable financial investment, but it will pay dividends in the years ahead for the communities concerned. We know that that community faced a great deal of racism and economic shocks during the pandemic, and the wider community organisations are also supporting Hong Kongers. And I know that Councillor Williams and Councillor Fajana Thomas, as well as Councillor and Assembly Member Marima, have been part of that work, and we're supporting that here. Beyond that, as you would expect, there is an update on our wider capital investment in the public realm and in our transport schemes. Councillor Coban obviously nodding there, and that shows that even in these difficult financial times, using Section 106 and our own capital resources, we're able to continue to invest in the borough's future and infrastructure. I will stop there and ask if anyone has any questions, comments on the recommendation. None, so if we can agree the recommendations. Yep, thank you. So item 11 is the council tax base and local business rates income decision. Can I check if this is by roll call as a vote? Yeah, so it's a roll call vote. And also members are reminded that the calculation of the council tax base is covered by Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. This provides that if a member owes 2 or more months arrears of council tax, they're obliged to disclose this fact at the meeting and not vote on the matter. Failure to comply is a criminal offence, punishable by a fine. Councillor Chapman to introduce the report. Sorry, just Jessica, there was an exempt appendix in the capital update. Is that what you were behind? It's 12 and 13. Cool. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. This is one, as we've alluded to, a formal report that we need to take as we move towards setting the council tax and budget for the council next month. which enable us to set sort of, as it says, council tax base for the year, which is the level of the collection that we expect. As you'll see from the report, we are proposing that our assumed collection rate will be 93%, which is up from last year. But you'll all understand that the immense difficulties we've all faced, what with the effect of coronavirus on the economy and our own difficulties with the criminal cyber attack. And we shouldn't underestimate the background, economic difficulties there are, which affect the residents and businesses of the borough as well. So that collection rate is lower than it has been in some years. It's a lot higher than it has been going back historically, but it will provide a sound basis for us as we go forward and set the budget. It's just worth saying, as we get back in really to collecting council tax, that our officers are absolutely aware of the sensitivities that they'll need to show in doing that, and use the opportunity when we do chase arrears to make sure people are aware of all the help and benefits and associate support that we can provide. It is important that we collect money owing to us. We need to do that to support our services, but we are completely aware that we must do that in the most sensitive way possible. I commend the report to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Also highlight obviously the pooling around business rates, and that while we're proposing no changes to the current CTRS scheme, Councillor Chapman and Scrutiny are working on a long-term future of that scheme to increase its fairness. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll do the roll call. Do you want to do it? Or?
Yep, that's fine.
I'll hand that over to Jessica.
Thank you. Okay, if you could please let me know if you're for, against, or abstain. We'll start with Mayor Glanville.
For.
Councillor Bramble.
For.
Councillor Nicholson.
For.
Councillor Coburn.
For.
Councillor Kennedy.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
Sorry. For.
Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Vajana Thomas.
For.
And Councillor Williams. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Agreed. So item 12, I did a fair intro to my opening remarks, which is the lease to the council of 5163 Ridley Road, commonly known as the Hama or Hama, I think, shopping village, which I visited today. There is an exempt appendix that if people want to discuss, we would either have to do at the end, or we can be content with moving into the exempt section of the agenda. I don't really have anything more to add than my opening remarks, but to again thanks not just to the Market Service, but legal and other colleagues. It has been a true piece of partnership working with Councillor Nicholson and the ward councillors, and I can see that Councillor Nicholson wants to say some remarks, which is absolutely fantastic. And obviously, as Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Business and Markets, it very much chimes with the work that you've been doing. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. And I just wanted to briefly kind of echo your thanks and gratitude to all of the various officers from different services that have come together to bring this forward this evening. And I just wanted, if I may add to your comments, just some sort of reflections and realities from the Market Services perspective. And just to remind us all that Ridley Road sees over 2 million customers per annum, and it's managed to maintain extraordinary levels of custom for the market traders of Ridley Road Street Market throughout the pandemic. It was the only street market in London that remained open on the 6-day trading cycle throughout all of the lockdowns and the pandemic, and an absolute credit to both the market traders themselves for keeping that supply of fresh produce coming through for residents, as well as, of course, to officers themselves in a number of different services within the council, who made sure that the market itself and the street and the surrounding environment was managed in a safe way for all customers and traders to be able to keep that supply of fresh produce open throughout. And just one other reflection, Mayor Glanville, if I may. Hackney is also the first borough, and I know that Councillor Kennedy, I think, will be very happy to hear this, that Hackney was the first and only borough to ensure that all of the fruit and vegetable traders in the borough are signed up to the Alexander Rose Charity Initiative. And what that does is that it releases vouchers to low-income families in our borough, in our communities, to be able to use to purchase fresh fruit and vegetables from our street markets. And Ridley Road has been at the front of delivering on that initiative for the community. And over £40,000 worth of fresh produce, £40,000 worth of vouchers has been sort of processed through that initiative over the course of the lockdown. And that is a real credit, I think, to the council and to the market service. I'll finish there, having talked them up, really trumpeted Ridley Road and the market service. So thank you, Mayor Glanville.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I think that vividly brings alive a truly circular economy to the benefit of all of our residents. And I think I'm right in saying, and you may have touched on it there, that there's only been a 2% decrease in traders between the 2019 pre-pandemic figure and now. And most other boroughs in London are seeing a double-digit reduction, whereas that investment during the pandemic, the work around grants, the work to support it through things like Alexander Road, has ensured that our street markets and our traders and what they offer our residents and visitors has been maintained, which again goes to the heart of who is standing with our market traders and saving. It looks like that's triggered something, Deputy Mayor Nicholson, then I'll come to you.
Well, I mean, just to complete, if I may, Mayor Glanville, is that by taking on this lease, not only is it good value for the council and for the market service itself and its operations, serving all of the borough street markets, not just Ridley Road, but it also opens up that space for traders too, and for local businesses. And one other thing just to add is that over 160 new businesses, new traders were created over the course of the pandemic by the market service. And the Ridley Road Shopping Village is one of those places where you can try out your business, you can set up your trade, market traders can use storage facilities. So bringing that under council management, absolutely the right step to go. And it comes back to your earlier comments about an inclusive economy, Mayor Glanville. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Barron's going to have to wait one tiny bit because we're having a bit of a double act here. The thing I would just also highlight, looking at Appendix 1 and the map, having been in the basement and seen its current condition, it's really clear to unlock that future for the market. It needs the investment from the owner, but working with them on the spec. I cannot imagine being a trader and renting storage in the environment that you see in the basement at the moment. I've taken some photographs today that I'll probably share later on social media, but it comes as no surprise that only 6 units are being rented because they're not fit for purpose. What we're unlocking here is proper storage for market traders and the indoor shopping village. Crucial as well, as I heard today, are access to toilet facilities for traders. The last walkabout Deputy Mayor Nicholson and I did, I think in the autumn of last year, we've managed to extend the operating hours of the existing toilets in Bradbury Mews so that traders can use it as they set up stalls. I think they open a lot earlier in the morning, but no substitute for dedicated toilet facilities for both indoor and outdoor market traders. We unlock that through this investment. We also unlock refrigeration for the first time. So the very stall holders that are part of the Alexander Rose scheme, providing some of the most accessible and affordable fruits and vegetables, meats and fish for our residents, don't currently have cold storage in and around the market. That will be delivered through this scheme, which I think is incredibly powerful. And I also know that there's ongoing work to explore what we can do to support the artists in the affordable workspace upstairs, and having talked to all the people today involved, those conversations continue, because obviously this is a story about the ground and the lower ground. But really exciting opportunity. Deputy Mayor Bramble, who's been incredibly patient.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Just to build on some of those thoughts, first of all, to thank Deputy Mayor Nicholson for his leadership in this area, and all the officers across the council that have been working on this investment. It's a much needed work in the north of the borough, and I'm sure we all welcome that piece of work. Just to also comment on the voucher scheme, that piece of work was so appreciative, because actually it's one of the markets in Hackney that offers such a broad range of fruit, vegetables and supplies that come from a variety of backgrounds. Many of those backgrounds are people who live in our communities, and the fact that many could walk or just get on a bus to continue to have that access during the pandemic, I know made a huge difference. So just want to thank you as well for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Bramble, and powerfully said. With all of that and the multiple double acts with our deputy mayors, are we happy to agree the report? And I'm assuming we don't need to discuss the exempt appendix. No, great, fantastic, agreed. Thank you. Item 13 also has an exempt appendix. Normally, this paper would have gone to Cabinet Procurement and Insourcing Committee, but to keep the contract award process on track, we're bringing it to Cabinet this evening. A huge amount of work has gone into this procurement exercise, including looking at the long-term opportunities not only improve this service for our corporate buildings, and I know there are many interested parties probably watching this evening who want to see that improvement, but also the long-term journey to what elements of this contract that we can, over the long haul, in-source. That's all there in the substantive paper. Obviously, it can feel like a dry exercise, but actually, from the work to roll out our vaccine centre to the much of the work that we do around our corporate buildings that allow us to deliver projects like the NVF, this is a really important contract, and so thank again the officers involved for getting it to this stage. I won't add anything more though. Does anyone want to discuss either the exempt appendix or have any questions or comments on the report? No. We're happy to agree the report. Thank you very much indeed. Now we have the Gender and Ethnicity Pay Gap, and Councillor Williams. Just as a way of introduction, I would have said it in my opening remarks, but I thought it was better suited here. Just a huge credit to Councillor Williams and the team working on this report for going above and beyond statutory legislation and reporting both the gender and ethnicity pay gaps. I know that's really important. They come both to Cabinet and to full council, and to also sort of suggest that we're looking at what more we can do around some of the other pay gaps and protected characteristics. I'm sure Councillor Williams will either tonight or on Wednesday hint at that, but it is all about being an inclusive employer and the contribution that reporting this data gives to that local leadership around inclusion. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. So since 2017, employers with 250 or more employees are required by the Pay Gap Information Regulations 2017 to publish their data on the gender pay gap. As a large employer, that's exactly what the council has been doing, as the Mayor has set out. We have been uploading our data to the government website as well as the council's website ahead of that 31st of March deadline. We've done so again this year. The report gives statistics on the 5th gender pay gap report, and in compliance with the legislation, and it will again be made available on the council's website. The top lines are that the gender pay gap favours women employees for the 5th year running. I think that's an incredible testament to what we are doing here in Hackney and our senior leadership team. So the top 2 quartiles of the organisation has more women and therefore we have a positive gender pay gap. It compares favourably across local government on both median and mean, where it favours men. So we are the inverse of that. For the eagle-eyed among you, you'll see that the 2020-21 report is marked as late on the government website. As I said last year, that was due to the government changing reporting requirements due to the pandemic. As the Mayor set out, we are also reporting our ethnicity pay gap, and that's contained in the same paper. Unlike the gender pay gap, there's no legal requirement for us to do so, but we have made a commitment to calculating that using the methodology based on the gender pay gap. There are significant challenges, however, because not everyone is required to report their ethnicity. So the figures won't be completely accurate, though they do give us a very good indication of the profile of the organisation at those 4 quartiles. This year, the data shows that the pay gap favours white employees, again, that's for the 4th year running, as measured by the mean, and it's 12.94% as measured by the median. COVID impacted the data for 2010-20, both in terms of wages and hours worked, and also disrupted the collection of data. And this means that comparisons with the 2020 figures should be treated with caution. We remain committed to Inclusive Leadership Programme, to tackling specific diversity challenges, and we continue to make progress on developing the Inclusive Management Toolkit. We continue to improve our understanding of workforce profile and dynamics, and we're tackling racism and discrimination and have developed an anti-racism action plan. And the staff survey results for this year show that the majority of staff believes that the council demonstrates a commitment to equality and diversity, both in principle as well as in practice. And finally, I'll just close by reiterating what the Mayor had said about taking an intersectional approach to understand other protected characteristics. I don't think that having a gender pay gap for every demographic is always helpful, but taking an intersectional view of that will help us considerably in understanding our workforce and ensuring that we deliver a diverse workforce.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And I think in your brief but very detailed introduction, it just shows that the work that you've led on this area. We're happy to agree and note, and I hope Councillor Coburn.
Yeah, it was just a quick note, just to first thank Councillor Williams for her leadership on this, and I think, yeah, again, this is another example of how Hackney is leading the way. One of the things that I just wanted to sort of allude to on the report, which I think is really important to highlight, is obviously the definition of Black, Asian, and ethnic minorities, and I think it's really important that that we note that the way it's being referenced in this report, understanding that culture and ethnically diverse sort of communities, and understanding sort of how we define minorities is extremely important. I'm very glad to see that this features part of the report. So thank you to Councillor Williams on her leadership on this.
Glanville, you looked at me as if to say, Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Councillor.
As you looked across, I will then say a few words on this, just to thank Councillor Williams for her leadership and officers. But I think the fact that Hackney goes over and above sets the standards. It leads and shows other local authorities what we can do. It's a mirror, hopefully, for local government, central government, to look at itself to see what can be delivered. And I think it's a really good piece of work. And thank you for your advocation on this, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. And I suppose the last bit is, the Equality Act 2010 was a landmark piece of legislation of the last Labour government. And actually, we have kept that flame as a council firmly alive and looked at things like class as well in our wider work. And I think this set of papers, and as you've highlighted, it's a much broader agenda, but this is a really good opportunity to renew that commitment and publish the kind of current state of play. So thank you again for those contributions. We're happy to agree the report. Thank you. Item 15 is the adoption of the North London Waste Plan Deputy Mayor Nicholson. And as I'm sure you're going to explain, it's not what some people might think it will be, and you'll be having to rehearse the same argument on Wednesday.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Mayor Glanville. And indeed, it will be coming, assuming that obviously Cabinet is minded to approve. It will be going to full council on Wednesday evening as well. And Mayor Glanville, if I may, just reassure all who are listening and all who are here this evening that this is not to do with the incinerator and the North London Waste Authority's work around bringing forward a new facility. This is very much an operational, day-to-day piece of planning policy, which relates to day-to-day operational matters to do with the management of waste and recycling within our borough. And alongside the other 6 North London Waste Authority boroughs, each borough is going through exactly the same exercise. So it's looking at places within each respective borough where that management of waste and recycling could take place. And it is a planning policy document that looks towards 2035. So it's anticipating the flow of waste and recycling that would need to be managed over that period of time. It has taken Mayor Glanville some time to come back round. And you may recall that at the beginning of this current administration, in the autumn of 2018, indeed, we actually last saw this plan as both a cabinet and as a council. And since that time, it has been quite kind of sort of busy, including in our borough, where there was some concern about some of the sites that were originally planned to be identified. All of that has been reconciled, Mayor Glanville, over the course of the last 4 years. And now, as we near the end of this current administration, finally, the planning inspector has indeed passed their comments on the plan, and this is the final version for adoption this evening. And each borough, each of the 7 boroughs, will be making their own decision on this particular policy document. So it's very much here to support Councillor Coburn's work around recycling and increasing the borough's recycling rate, as well as the general waste management functions. And as you can probably guess, Mayor Glanville, the areas and sites that are identified, 2 of those already accommodate the facility that we all know and love down in Millfields, which is literally the centre, the beating heart, if you like, of the waste services, Councillor Coburn. I may get a bit of a narrative in there. And the other site is a site that has long been identified in the borough, in Hackney Downs ward, as a potential site for recycling and waste management, and that designation remains the same. So with that, the report is, and the recommendations are as set out, Mayor Glanville. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. I look forward to a similar speech on Wednesday. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on the report? No? We're happy to agree? Thank you. Items 16 and 17 cover a very similar theme, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. So I assume you'll sort of bundle them in a sense, although they're obviously treated as 2 separate reports. I suppose I would have said it in my opening remarks, but again, this is an example of the council swiftly going above and beyond, I think, to ensure that our Article 4 protections for our high streets, shops and business and commercial uses are kind of locked in. I know it was something that the previous administration and this have made a huge amount of work on and campaigning, and I think it is why we have not seen the poor quality office conversions that so many parts of the country have been blighted with and that have exploited so many vulnerable tenants in towns and cities across the southeast. You know, if many of those cities and towns had done what we had done from the very start, I don't think we would have seen the poor quality housing and exploitation that we've seen in places like Stevenage and Slough and other locations. And it is a testament to the work of our planning service and you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson, for your leadership on this. But also when you take it down to a high street like Chatsworth Road, we've seen what sort of previous generations have lost some of those shopping units to housing and what impact that can have on economic streets like Chatsworth Road and others. And while the government thinks that this is a great route to the delivery of housing supply, actually what it does is damage our high streets and doesn't deliver the quality housing that I know we want to see. I'm sure I've stolen some of your best lines there, Councillor Nicholson, but you know, a really, really impressive piece of work, and actually recognising that change and getting ahead of it, I think is incredibly important. But over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville, and echo absolutely everything that you've just sort of said then. Thank you very much indeed for doing that and for saying that. Just going back to your point about they are two separate papers with two separate decisions, but they should be seen together, absolutely, Mayor Glanville. And the two reports between them ensure that anyone wishing to convert what in effect is employment spaces of one description or another along our high streets and in our town centres, including within Shoreditch and the Central Activities Zone, need to come forward and seek planning permission to do that. And these two, I'm going to call them renewed Article 4 directions, if I may, are in response to the change in legislation that the government had implemented, which again tried to sort of sidestep the initial measures that we'd put in place to ensure that planning permission was sought for all such conversions. And you made a very, very, very eloquent point about where such conversions do take place. Those conversions are completely exempt from any social housing contribution of any description. And to be quite frank, seem to spend pretty much to deliver nothing but substandard homes for people going forward, as well as that point that you well made about the gradual erosion of local high streets and the economies that feed a neighbourhood. So if you want to take the first one first, it's as set out, and then if you want to move to the second one, it too is also as set out. Over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. I think Councillor Williams, you've indicated you wanted to come in.
Yes, Mrs. Oh, I was going to call you Mr. Speaker. Thank you. So I did want to welcome this and wanted to note for everyone's attention paragraph 1.6. I'll take my mask off, sorry. And that what this does is give us an opportunity to protect employment in the borough and potentially save thousands of jobs as set out in that paragraph. Given the ongoing impact of the pandemic on spending, given the impact of the criminal cyber attack, as Councillor Chapman spoke about, and ongoing austerity as well, we as a council need to use every lever available to us to protect those jobs and to reduce poverty in the years that are coming. And by protecting these spaces, it means that we will be able to do just that. So I really welcome the work that Councillor Nicholson has led on in this area. Employment is going to be incredibly important for our residents going forward, as it always is, but it's going to have a particularly new significance going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and echo that. And while there isn't a direct link back to the discussion we had about the shopping village, I do think the activist use of Article 4 and assets of community value in combination has meant that some of those institutions and buildings we've been able to sort of preserve with economic and cultural uses that would have been lost if we hadn't put this in at the ground floor, so to speak, of these policies. I think things like Passing Clouds and other places where there were attempts to convert those buildings to residential, and as we say, you know, used in combination with assets of community value have been really powerful, especially in Shoreditch and Dalston. where Councillor Williams obviously represents in terms of Hoxton, as well as the business and skills role. Are we happy to, I'm going to separate them out for the purposes of governance. So item 16, are we happy to agree? Thank you. Item 17? Agreed. Excellent. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 18. Before Deputy Mayor Bramble introduces the report, again, another report that's going to full council, I just wanted to sort of highlight, as referenced in the introduction, it has been an unprecedented year, 2 years for our children and family services. We obviously had the Ofsted notification at the end of 2019, and all of the work, hard work and leadership to obviously bring forward a plan and a governance regime and the investment to move to outstanding, but then obviously the criminal cyber attack and the impact referenced here. But I think there is some really good positive work highlighted here, our commitment to safeguarding, our commitment to those services, the Ofsted journey, the focused visit and the drop down, the 2-day visit that's referenced at the end of your introduction. None of us are complacent. We're not saying it's a sort of clean bill of health at all, but we're saying it's real progress and real representation of delivery. And I'm sure you want to say more, Deputy Mayor Bramble, so I won't steal your thunder.
Thank you so much, Mayor Glanville. I'll just continue where you referenced Ofsted. I'll start by continuing to say it has been an unprecedented time. I think children's social care is one of those parts of the council, and one of the most important things that we do can be challenging outside of a pandemic, and then to overlay that by a cyber attack is just unprecedented. I mean, no training could prepare you for such a time. And you're right, we are on a journey moving forward to good and then aspiring for outstanding, because we want nothing better for our children and young people. And I want to thank the staff and all elected members for their hard work, commitment and dedication, and just the boldness of the service, Mayor Glanville, to be even more transparent and more open at looking at itself, and to thank them because they have been working tirelessly on that. Also, the work that they've been doing with children and families and those that have come and been identified to our services through the pandemic and what that has meant. I think one of the things that came out, like I referenced in the early help review, was that growing trust within the organisation and what that means with our children and family. It is about systemic practice. It is about trust. It is about intervention at the right time. It is about evidence-based, but all of that is underpinned through trust. And that trust has come from the hard work of staff going out and working with our children and families. I want to thank Mayor Glanville and actually Mark on their leadership on this, because I really reflect on being the statutory deputy mayor. I do have to reflect on, I do sit very senior in the organisation, but it absolutely does not work unless you and Mark at the very top of the organisation are charging on our corporate responsibility and signalling to the system this is something really important that we all have to do. And I want to thank the two of you and commend the two of you for that, because it doesn't work in isolation. Everything that our children and family needs doesn't sit within this political portfolio. And I want to thank the other elected members that have sat on the oversight board. I want to welcome Jackie and Diane and commend the work that they have been doing, and that both of them have literally been on the end of the phone, sometimes over the weekend, but we won't talk so much about that, to ensure that actually everything that we're doing and the access of what our children and family needs. I can talk through the data, but the data is there. I think the most important thing to say is that I want to thank the staff and the senior team elected members for support of the service. But actually, I can talk about innovation, pioneering scenarios and creativity. All of that's still there, but the essence of what I want everyone to take away with is that we've gone back to basics and we're not overlooking that. And everything else stems from that. It's back to basics. Those principles of looking, seeing and being curious about what's happening with our children and families is absolutely core. It's absolutely the day work. It's absolutely bread and butter. And then the innovation, creativity and the pioneering work that Hackney's known for stems from that. I'm going to pause there, Mayor Glanville, because I think that's quite a lot of time I spoke.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble, and thanks for your very, very kind words. Do colleagues have any other questions or comments? And again, we'll be making some of these same points on Wednesday. No. Agree the report? Thank you. Item 19, and thanks for the patience of officer colleagues who've waited for this item. It's the Place for Everyone voluntary sector grants. I'll hand over to Councillor Kennedy. Do just highlight for Cabinet colleagues, I know we made the declarations comment at the start. I don't think I have any board relationships with any of the organisations that we're about to award in appendix, but please do, colleagues, just sorry, Councillor Lufkin, I think you might be in the wrong room. Don't worry, very welcome at Cabinet. But just to check the appendix to make sure that you've made the necessary declarations. And just sort of finally to emphasise, I'm sure Councillor Kennedy will expand upon it. You know, another opportunity to thank the team that lead our voluntary sector approach. I can see Sonia there, but also the borough's voluntary sector. All parts of it. I think the report sort of updates why we're taking this approach based on the pandemic. But you know, as we gave the freedom of the borough and other things, it's an important moment to recognise the contribution that they make to the borough and our COVID response. I'd also sort of emphasise that under this administration and previous ones, while we haven't been able to always maintain real terms increases, we have maintained our funding in these grant programmes, and it's been a priority for us. I think the context of that is very vividly put in both your introduction and the lead officer's introduction. Did you want to make a declaration, Deputy Mayor Bramble?
No, I didn't actually, but I was reflecting on item 18, Chair, just to also note my thanks to Ian Williams and to Dawn and their service, and Councillor Chapman as part of the work that we've been doing on children's social care.
Noted, thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, as you noted in your introduction, we're living in extraordinary times at the moment, and what our voluntary and community sector have done for Hackney during the course of this pandemic builds on exceptionally good work that many of them were doing already. But I'm really pleased that in times that, as Councillor Chapman said earlier in one of his introductions, where we're having to find huge resource efficiencies as a council, we are still managing to support to the same tune of £2.5 million our voluntary and community sector through the grants programme. The work that we've done with them during the course of the pandemic, establishing the community partnership network, working out how funding best suits them and best supports our organisations, has built on what those organisations told us when we created the voluntary and community sector strategy that we worked on producing with them in 2019. And it's very clear from both that strategy and the work that we've done with them during the pandemic that support for the core ability of organisations to maintain their core service and their core support for their communities is highly important. And so this paper, whilst the funding does not go down, the amount of funds that we put into project-only grants does go down in order for us to do two things. Firstly, to establish a £400,000 core grant fund that organisations can apply for in order not just to be required to spend that money on individual projects, but to enable them to support the core foundation of what they do as an organisation and how they support our communities. And the second thing is to realise that the stress that our communities are under at this time, with the cost of living crisis, with what the pandemic has put them through, means that our advice services are massively stretched. And so the advice service grants that previously, to the tune of £750,000 we have given, we are increasing up to £1 million. So it's basically a pivot from that project-based funding into the core grants and an increase in the advanced sector grants. And I think I'm very proud that we're doing that. It's clearly the right thing for us to have done and to be doing. The grants to the specialist organisations, we have kept the same. Those are laid out for you in Appendix 1 alongside the advice sector grants. So I would ask Cabinet to support those recommendations, please. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Kennedy. Just also, I think you've hinted at it. I know it was subject to sort of previous debate, but there are very few local authorities that provide this level of direct investment in advice services and are able to pivot in this way to reflect that rising need as well. And there are very few local authorities that support their CAB directly in this way, never mind their law centre and some of those other organisations. And it's been a critical part of the infrastructure in terms of responding to the community partnership network and beyond. So again, thank you for that work. Councillor Coburn, then Deputy Mayor Bramble.
Very quick, thank you, Chair. I just want to firstly congratulate Councillor Kennedy on his very important work on this. I wanted to sort of speak on this as someone who has experience of running a charity and how important that core funding is, as you explained, because it allows those organisations to not have to think about the specific project management, but give them the sort of capacity to be able to grow as an organisation. And, having looked at the organisations, the diversity of organisations that are involved in there, I think it's so important that we're not just giving them the funding they need now, but that core funding will crucially support them to grow in the next 2 to 5 years, which is what we need.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble.
Just to say that this investment definitely shows our validity as a council of what we believe in our voluntary services. And I would say as a ward council, it definitely was handy during the pandemic to be able to signpost people to this body of organisations. It was critical and key. And in my broader role across the borough as Deputy Mayor, just hearing from people, referencing the groups that we support means everything. And they're very much in the heart of our response to the pandemic, but also as we move beyond the pandemic and think about life post-COVID and what that looks like, they continue to lead the charge alongside us to support our families and our individuals in our community. So thank you and the staff.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Bramble. I know that you were at the Damer AGM, which I'm sure you were channeling in your thoughts there. Are we happy to agree the report and recommendations? Agreed. There are no other unrestricted items that I consider urgent. Dates of future meetings, 28th of February, I cannot think of a better place to spend my 42nd birthday than in this room, so I'm very much looking forward to that. The 14th of March, obviously slightly earlier to do with the pre-election period and any political, and then the 25th of April, and then we're at the end of the municipal year and the local elections. We've dealt with the exempt items. You didn't wish to discuss them, so no need to move into exempt business, but obviously they're there. And happy to end the meeting, and I think we're pretty clear that Councillor Deputy Mayor Nicholson is wanted somewhere else, although I didn't like the way that was brought home, so do join Seg, I think, in another room.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everyone, and a good start to the new year all, and thanks very much for attending Cabinet.
Welcome back, Chair.